What is going on, everybody, and welcome to Let's Chop It Up, my pretty nondescript live streams that I'll do from time to time on things that I'm interested in talking about. And obviously, one of the biggest things, actually the biggest thing that's being talked about right now, is this article from the Hollywood Reporter that is featuring Ray Fisher and goes into detail about a lot of the controversy surrounding his time on Justice League, as well as just in general, some of the allegations of unsavoriness and pretty shitty behavior that was going on behind the scenes. Now, I mean, obviously not going to go into a whole recap of the saga itself. I mean, that's well documented. I think we all know, for the most part, how the entire thing with Justice League played out. But absolutely, I'm going to go through the article because I actually have not read the entire article. I've read bits and pieces, but I'd like to go through the whole thing with you guys. So I appreciate you guys for coming into the stream. We're going to get into this right now. I'm not going to waste too much time. And we'll go through it, and I'll kind of just give my perspective. I mean, only perspective I can give is perspective based on my own life experience. So I'm not going to sugarcoat anything if I feel a certain way, and I'm not going to just automatically take everything, that's said here as, 100% absolute fact if I don't think that it necessarily is. If I know that there are things that can play out in different ways, or there may be some further confirmation of things that I feel like need to be, may need to have further confirmation in order to really lock it in as absolute fact. I'll just call it how I see it. I'm not going to try and be too critical. I'm just gonna try and give it a go from how I see things. So let's take a look at the article. Hollywood Reporter. Obviously, this is the biggest story going on right now. Do me a favor first before we get started. Make sure you smash that like button. Share this out there. Let's get the room filled up. Let's have a conversation about it afterwards. And, we'll do like kind of an open discussion once we get done with the article. It's a pretty long article. So, let's get into it. Okay. We got a picture of Ray there. It says Ray Fisher opens up about Justice League, Joss Whedon and Warner's. I don't believe some of these people are fit for leadership. That's a quote from Ray Fisher. It says, over the past year, the actor has assailed the filmmaker and studio in harsh but cryptic tweets for what he says was racist and inappropriate conduct. I'm not so indebted to Hollywood that I haven't been willing to put myself out there. Now, that kind of gives you a little basis for why he's continued to kind of push, to kind of voice this entire situation in the way that he has, is that he's not a Hollywood star. He's not in the Hollywood culture per se. He was new to this. He was a rookie. This was his first go in Hollywood. So, it's not like based on what we know now, with the way that 2017 was handled, there was no space for him to become a star in Hollywood. There just wasn't. It wasn't there. Because the character and the character arc of Cyborg was so butchered from the original Snyder cut that there really was no end as far as him being able to reach the potential that he may have had the original Snyder cut been released. I think, if the original movie is released, then we're probably talking about a situation where Ray Fisher is, maybe he's got his own movie. He's got a Cyborg movie coming out, and he may be sitting in the same situation that somebody like Henry Cavill was sitting in after Man of Steel, where now you're getting more parts. And, obviously there's a difference between Superman and Cyborg, but still, Chadwick Boseman was started to see his ascension after his first appearance in The Winter Soldier. I'm sorry, not Winter Soldier, Civil War. So you saw that character because of the appeal that he had, and because of a lot of the a lot of parts of the heart of the movie, as far as these new characters were concerned. He was the one that had the most in-depth back, kind of world building done for him, as it was his first introduction to the audience, and people really grabbed onto that, and he became a big figure because of that. And R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman. But that was kind of what launched him into stardom. And this was the same situation for Ray Fisher. Ray Fisher was in a unique situation. He was the heart of a film that was being dismantled and reassembled to remove him as that heart of the film. Like, that's something that I would have taken deeply personal. This is his life on the line. This is his livelihood that they're literally destroying before his very eyes and turning him into a trope of a character, into a comedic relief by making him use a term that the character Cyborg has never used in the comics, but uses in a kid's or a teenager's animated cartoon. Like, this is the situation he was in. So he didn't have nothing to lose. He had nothing to lose whatsoever. So this is why he put it out there. I think that's important to understand when you're looking at it when you're trying to put yourself in his shoes, is that, like, look, these people are trying to literally fucking take everything that you worked for out of your hands and turn you into turn you into an afterthought. I mean, I would be pissed. I would be fucking pissed. I would be irate. And why? And who's gonna blame you? I mean, if you lay it out there for how it really is, that's how it is. That's how it is. And look, we got the Snyder Cut, and we got a full version of the Snyder Cut. We got an untouched, pretty much, version of the film. Could the movie been trimmed down to like 3 hours, 15, 20 minutes? Yeah, easily. And you don't lose a lot of the elements that we gained over the 2017 version. So, there even if you trim this movie down into a more consumable product for the masses, this is a movie that still has Cyborg at the heart of the film, and still has characters like him, like the Flash, who have their moments that really define their characters and give them the kind of arc that maybe now allows for you to move on without having to necessarily go through origin films of everybody like you saw with the MCU. I think, you would have to have slightly longer movies in order to do that. And that's what I think Justice League presented. But let's get up into this. Let's get into it and try and see if we can break this thing down. It says Ray Fisher is ready to talk. Ever since June 2020, when he fired off a tweet accusing Joss Whedon of gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable conduct on the set of Justice League, the 33-year-old actor has used social media and a series of interviews to lob serious allegations of racist behavior and a cover-up at Warner Brothers. For Fisher, who plays Cyborg in the film, the issue is no longer so much what happened on the set of the 2017 after director Zack Snyder was replaced by Joss Whedon. Though he's ready to explain that too. His unrelenting focus in recent months has been the way executives, first at the Warner Film Studio and then at its parent Warner Media, handled allegations raised by himself and others. Warner Media has previously said that remedial action was taken as a result of its investigation, but has not elaborated. Okay. A spokesperson tells THR that for privacy and legal reasons, our policy is to not publicly disclose the findings of the results of an investigation. Okay. Catherine Forrest, a former federal judge who conducted the Warner Media probe, tells THR in a statement that in interviews With more than 80 witnesses, she found no credible supports for claims of racial animus or racial insensitivity. A Warner Media spokesperson notes that the company made extraordinary effort to accommodate Mr. Fisher's concerns about the investigation and to ensure its fullness and fairness, and has complete confidence in the investigation process and Forrest's conclusions. Fisher was raised by a single mother and his grandmother in Lawnside, New Jersey, a community that he notes was the first self-governing black municipality north of the Mason-Dixon line. He says he felt a new sense of urgency to speak out when the pandemic hit and the Black Lives Matter protesters took to the streets. To Fisher, who had few screen credits playing the half-man, half-machine cyborg, the first black superhero in the DC film universe, was both a huge career break and a major responsibility. Justice League was released in 2017, the year before Marvel broke ground with Black Panther. He was mindful that the film was overseen almost entirely by white executives and filmmakers. While Fisher has dropped details and named names, outsiders have struggled to understand how did Whedon incur this in his anger. Did Fisher really decline to participate in an investigation that was launched in response to his own complaints, as Warner's claimed in September? Was Fisher fighting a righteous battle or a quixotic one when he set out on a path that appears to have cost him his place in the DC film universe? Now, in many hours of conversation, Fisher tells his side. Much of his previous reluctance to spell out the story, he says, arose because he didn't and still doesn't want to expose the identities of others who shared their stories with him and investigators. I'm not looking to have any witnesses lose their jobs, he says. And I think that's kind of the double-edged sword that you play with in a situation like this. Because at the end of the day, many people who will look at this situation will say that this is all hearsay. These are all things that are being claimed to have been said, but there's not, you're not bringing concrete evidence to corroborate what it is you're accusing. And that is a valid point. It is a valid point. If you're going to go to the extent of to make something like this public, there's a way that you have to play it out, because you can't make accusations and have an absolute consensus of support unless you bring literal, undeniable proof that will back up your claims. And if you have people that can provide that corroboration, then if people are really about what they're talking about, if people are really willing to stand on those principles, there has to be a discussion with those witnesses to come public. They have to. Because then there is nowhere, if that's the case, and this is all my opinion, in this small portion of what I've read, just giving you my generic perspective. If you're going to make that accusation, you have to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's true. You do. Because that is quite the accusation to make. Does that mean that some people are going to lose their jobs? Probably, because there's something you have to understand about this kind of culture that I already kind of see where this is going, and the culture is really what the problem is. The culture is the problem. Because the culture actually makes it more difficult to come out and say these things, or there's going to be repercussions. That's like when I played football, being in like off-season workouts was a thing of discussion back then, because we just got a collective bargaining agreement. And even before that collective bargaining agreement, off-season workouts were not considered mandatory events that you had to be at. But a lot of times, and then I'm talking about the vast majority of times, everybody on the team was there, because even though it's not mandatory, If you don't show up to it and these are organized team activities, but they're not like actual legitimate in-season practices. These are off-season workouts, off-season team events. And you don't have to be there. In your contract, it says you don't have to be there. But if you don't show up, there's going to be a consequence when you come back. And it's not going to be anything it's not going to be anything official. It's not going to be anything that people will hear about. But there are players who have lost their starting positions because they weren't at off-season workouts. There are players who ownership and front office people then began to kind of isolate and cut off from any kind of negotiations for contract extensions because they didn't show up to voluntary workouts. Like, that happened. That has happened. So there are a lot of unwritten rules that get applied in certain cases to players or into individuals who are in these kind of cultures. And especially if you're a first year guy, a guy who is new to this entire industry on this level, there's going to be like a hazing process where they really fuck with you, where they really like try to like test you. And, hey, it's up to the individual on how they respond to that stuff. Like, it's different. I know it's not exactly the same when you're talking about acting, when you're talking about sports, but to those people who are high up in those positions of power, it is the same because they're not ever directly involved with the actions, with the actual work that's being done. They're just the people who make decisions. So it's always the same to them. When they got somebody who's new to it, who doesn't really know the ropes, they try and punk them. They try and humiliate them. If they get any kind of talk back, they start getting personal. They take it personal, and then it becomes an issue. And that's where you start seeing things like this happen. That's where you start, seeing or start hearing about comments being made just outside of your earshot. So, there's a lot of cultural problems that I can already assume go on within Warner Brothers itself, and it plays out. This is $1 billion industry. Plays out the same way it does in the other $1 billion industries. But let's keep going. Okay. Those include some who wouldn't seem to have any worries about job security, Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa. Others who were not involved with Justice League also spoke to Fisher. In some cases, the investigators about experiences with Whedon and Jeff Johns, who was co-chairman of DC Films and producer on the film. They include Charisma Carpenter, who recently wrote on social media of Whedon's alleged abusiveness on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and individuals who worked with Johns on Sci-Fi's Krypton. Fisher got Warner to start an investigation more than 2 years after the first version of the film was released, but he soon found the process to be suspicious. The studio and its parent company seem to be focused on protecting the top executives, he says. The process moved in starts and stops, and when he felt forced to ramp up his public protests, the studio responded with what Fisher called a deliberate smear. Warner's maintains it has done everything necessary to address Fisher's concern. He still wants an apology. And then we have a tweet here. This was the famous tweet that started the whole thing with between Ray and Warner. But again, well, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let me get more info in here before I move forward with any more kind of let me get some more info to give broader perspective. It says in May 2017, Fisher was walking into a movie in New York when he got a call from Zack Snyder that left him stunned. Snyder was leaving Justice League, citing his daughter's suicide. Sources say Snyder was under enormous pressure at the time. The studio was unhappy with the reception of the box office performance of his previous film, the bleak Batman v Superman, and with Justice League footage already shot, now insisted on a lighter touch. Warner's also asked Snyder to produce a 2-hour cut that he had a wrenching time delivering, though eventually did. Ultimately, Snyder left, and Whedon, who had written and directed Marvel's The Avengers and had already been brought in to help brighten Justice League's tone, took the helm. The Justice League that Fisher had signed up for was a far cry from the film that Whedon ended up finishing. Snyder had Fisher talk at length with screenwriter Chris Terrio before there was even a script. Zach and I always considered Cyborg's story to be the heart of the movie, Terrio tells THR. He has the most pronounced character arc of any of the heroes, beginning from the place of despair and ending with the feeling that he is whole, and that he is loved. And Terrio says he and Snyder took the portrayal of the first black superhero in the DC film universe very seriously. Adding, with a white writer and white director, we both thought having the perspective of an actor of color was really important, and Ray is really good with the story and the character. So he became a partner in creating Victor, referring to the character's given name. And I think that that's a really cool detail right there. I think that that is really says, you know, and look, I know that there are plenty of people, there are plenty of things that you can look at and kind of scoff at about how representation is handled in Hollywood. I don't think it's handled very well. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that there isn't an awareness for in when it comes to representation. What I'm saying is that it is a hypersensitive. There's a hypersensitivity to representation that becomes overcorrection, run amok. I mean, from left to right, you have overcorrecting and trying to do things, you know, in way you're trying to find the middle ground and how to do things and make it feel organic. Yet there's so much just forcefulness in that it becomes sometimes it puts people off, and sometimes it does. I feel like if you're going to do representation for minorities in Hollywood, you just do it and you don't talk about it. You don't make a big deal out of, oh, we have this person being an actor of this character. Like we've now changed this character from a white character to a black character, or we've included a trans character, or we've included a member of the LGBT community as characters. That's all fine and dandy. I have no problem with any of that. I think that when you put it out there as some sort of reckoning for all the other characters, because this character is going to change how things are perceived, and you make it out to be some kind of reckoning, that becomes a problem. Because at the end of the day, we want a good story, we want a good movie, we want a good TV show, we want a good comic book, and you know, we're willing to accept whatever characters are in there if you're giving us a story that's just a good story. You know, like, you don't have to beat us over the head with it being representation, because seeing it without hearing you say it actually has a better effect for me in just enjoying that character for who they are. I don't need you to tell me that it's this person or that person, but to see that they actually, Chris Terrio and Zack Snyder, wanted to allow Ray Fisher to be a part of creating the psyche and the character and part of the arc for Ray Fisher as Cyborg, because this was their first black DC hero on film in their films. You know, that's a cool thing, because it means that they're allowing his input to kind of lead the way in regards to Cyborg, because their perspective obviously would not be the same as his. That kind of makes their job a little bit easier, to be honest. It would make their job a little easier. Chris Terrio and Zack Snyder not having to concoct what they think is appropriate for Cyborg, and allowing Cyborg to have input in that, and, you know, in ways that it doesn't take away from the story, and it allows it to show the character's growth. I think that is actually that's commendable. I think that's a more organic way of seeing representation, allowing it to take hold. You know, when you're watching the Snyder Cut, you don't really hear about any of this shit. Like, Cyborg's story is just told to you, and you feel it or you don't. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, they just give you the story, which I think is the right way to handle it. If you're trying to work on bringing better representation, then just do it organically. Let the creators create that and let it go forward. It doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be a soapbox to stand on. Just let it be a part of the culture and let it take hold organically. And nobody's going to pay attention to it after a while because we're just getting good movies and good stories. That's what we want. So, that being said, let's keep going. With new filming proceeded under Whedon, says Fisher, he came to feel that he had to explain some of the most basic points of what would be offensive to the black community. After Fisher's reps were told that Whedon planned to make major revisions to the film, he flew to New Jersey to meet with the filmmaker in L.A. He flew from New Jersey to meet with the filmmaker in L.A. When the two met at a bar, Fisher says Whedon was tiptoeing around the fact everything was changing. As he left the meeting, Fisher was handed a revised script, which he read twice on the plane back. Gone was Cyborg's traumatic backstory, his relationship with his mother, his loving scenes with her son, whose loving scenes with her son were eliminated, as was the accident that killed her and led to his transformation. The material was later restored in the Snyder Cut of the film that streamed on HBO Max. It represents that his parents are two genius-level black people, Fisher says. We don't see that every day. Whedon sent out an email asking for questions, comments, or fulsome praise, but Fisher says it became clear all he was looking for was the fulsome praise. So we have an egomaniac here. Trying to strike a jocular tone, Fisher responded that he mourned the loss of Cyborg's material but was moving on. He said he had notes to avoid issues in terms of representation of the character, but in a call with Whedon, Fisher says he had barely started to talk when the filmmaker cut him off. It feels like I'm taking notes right now, and I don't like taking notes from anybody, not even Robert Downey Jr. So he flexed on him. He fucking literally pulled his dick out and put it on the table. That's what Joss Whedon did that's what he metaphorically did when he was talking to Ray Fisher on the phone about, his, just kind of a feedback session, where you're giving your information on how you feel based on what you've read on the script. I mean, same things, when you have a meeting with somebody and you go over information and you come back and you give them feedback on it, he wasn't really allowed to give that feedback. And that was the flex that Joss Whedon put on him. Other sources on the project say Whedon was similarly dismissive of Godot and Momoa when they questioned new lines. Whedon declined to comment for this piece. Yeah, of course. Fisher turned to Johns, who he says had presented himself as a kind of mediator, but Fisher says his ultimate response was, "We can't make Joss mad." Okay. We can't make Joss mad. So that means that old Jeffy boy was being a little puss. That's what that means. All right. Publicist Howard Bragman, who represents Johns, denies that, but says Johns recalls suggesting that any creative pitches should happen when Joss was not preoccupied so that he would be most receptive. That's the same fucking thing. It's literally the same thing. Recall suggesting that any creative pitches should happen when Joss Whedon was not preoccupied, so he would be most receptive. That is the same thing as saying we can't make Joss mad. We can't make Joss mad. That's the same thing. What are we really talking about here? This is crazy. Wow. Wow, that's literally the same thing, just reworded. We have to find him when he's not busy. Why? So he won't get mad. Once Whedon got involved, and basically when you're at the point there, when you're making a movie, and in this situation, especially when he's remaking a movie, when are you going to find him not preoccupied? He's on a tight schedule. To be fair to him, he's on a tight ass schedule. He's not going to have time to talk about shit. And we can see he's a bit of an egomaniac. He's not going to want to hear shit from a first-year actor, a first-time Hollywood guy. He's not going to listen to this cat. And I think that's where, understanding the situation that he was in, That's where it can be. That's where you can be put in a position where you're asked whether or not you're going to compromise your principles. Now, does this mean that Does this mean that Ray Fisher is 100% justified in maybe not wanting to be a part of the reshoots in the way that they're presenting it? Well, you don't know, because he never really got to have a fair airing of his concerns when dealing with Whedon, because Whedon didn't want to hear it. So he's definitely seems that he went hella overboard in being a fucking asshole. But let's continue on reading, because I mean we're not even halfway through this. Okay, once Whedon got involved, Fisher says that Johns told him that it was problematic that Cyborg smiled only twice in the movie. Fisher says he later learned from a witness who participated in the investigation that Johns and other top executives, including then DC Films chairman John Berg and Warner Studio chief Toby Emmerich, had discussions in which they said they cannot have an angry black man at the center of the film. John's rep, that's the first time I've read that. John's rep responds that once the chairman of the studio mandated a brighter tone for the film, all further discussions centered on adding joy and hopefulness to all 6 superheroes. There are always conversations about avoiding any stereotype of race, gender, or sexuality. Okay. So, it's funny. Let's be real. Saying that they cannot have an angry black man at the center of the film, that's some bullshit. That's some bullshit. I mean, let's just be 100% clear here. That is ignorant, racist, and unfortunate that you would say some shit like that, because the angry, that's a trope. That's a trope of black men. And that comes from situations that, black men, black people, minorities deal with. There comes a certain point when you get tired of people, disrespecting you. So you get pissed and you step to them. And that's where that trope comes from. That's where that trope comes from, that every black man who feels like they're being pressured on in ways that are, that are somewhat prejudiced towards them or discriminatory towards them, that the first reaction is for them to get mad, and a lot of times that's like the 5th reaction. But I mean, no person, regardless of race, is going to want to be insulted or want to be disrespected. So, to do that, to say that they couldn't have an angry black man at the center of a film, I mean, that is, look, Ray Fisher is new to this culture. He's new to this world of Hollywood. But even, if as a football player in the football world, which is a similar kind of culture when you get up to those high levels of decision-making and power, very similar. But even in those situations, for a coach or a GM or even an owner to cross that line and say something that disrespectful, there's going to be problems. There is absolutely going to be problems, because that is going to piss anybody off. That'll piss any person off who is put in that kind of, or talked about in that sense, or that kind of description, or of how they're perceiving something to be that's not true. So I would have been so fucking pissed. I would have been hot. You know how y'all see me with Mr. H? I would have been something like that if they would have said something like that about me. Because, look, that's crossed the business line now. That's crossed the line of, we're trying to make a movie that's 2 hours long, and we can't have a 4 hour long Justice League. We need it to be 2 hours. That's That's a business decision that you're making right there as an executive. But to say that we can't have an angry black man as the center of the film, that's not a business decision. That is that's a perspective. That's an assumption. That's a presumption of how a character is going to be seen by an audience based on a stereotype, based on a trope, based on something that really is not, indicative and nothing that can speak for the vast majority of that group of people. So, I would have taken that very personally on top of everything they were already doing. Like that just put the cherry on the cake. But again, to be 100% fair to this, these are things that we're hearing. These are things that are being said. But we need corroborating, definitive data, whether it be text messages, recordings, report findings, investigation results with specifics listed. These are the things that you need to, have that consensus public backing. You need corroborating, definitive evidence with names attached, dates attached, times attached. And that might mean that some people lose their jobs. If they are, I feel like it's not fair, but that is the the retribution of corporate interests and billionaire salaries. They can make shit happen before they got to go out the door. They can make a lot of cats' lives miserable before they have to leave. But let me take a look here at the chat. What's going on with you guys in the chat? Okay. All right. So let's continue going on here. I think that to me, saying that to me, that this right here is, that's enough to go to, that's enough to fuel a crusade. I can promise you that. So I can see why Ray Fisher continues on, because that is got to be absolutely a motivating factor in why he wants to bring on, why he's talking about it. I just feel like there's another step that needs to be taken. If you really want to put this thing into thermonuclear mode, you got to drop their names, all of them. But I understand why he's not. I will not. I'll say that I understand why he's not, because he is thinking about the ripple effect that does not center solely with just his life, but other people's lives. So he wants to, he is not going to, to spread his burden and his gamble to people who haven't asked to be a part of that. And I can respect that. I can understand that. It says here, Johns told Fisher he should play the character less like Frankenstein and more like the kind-hearted Quasimodo. Fisher says that in order to demonstrate the look he wanted, John dipped his shoulders in what struck Fisher as a servile posture. So he was basically like in kind of a submissive posture, which is, we kind of see what Johns is all about. He's a puss to begin with, clearly. To Fisher, there was a big difference between portraying a character who was born with a disability versus one who had been transformed by trauma. And he felt Cyborg was kind of a modern day Frankenstein. I don't think, I didn't have any intention of playing him as a jovial cathedral cleaning individual, he says. John's representative responds, Jeff gave a note using a fictional character as an example of a sympathetic man who is unhappy and has an inclination to hide from the world, but one whom the audience roots for because he has a courageous heart. Okay, he had a courageous heart in the regular Snyder Cut version as well. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, and this is, from watching it the first time, Cyborg is a character that I was so heavily invested in him. I was. I thought that the way that they introduced him was brilliant. I thought the way that his backstory was told was brilliant. I thought the weight of his character's responsibility was on point because of his power set. And I liked that the connection between him and his father began to grow more and more as Victor was finding his spot on the team with the Justice League and finding himself being useful and trying to become it reintegrated into his own life. And part of that was part of that had to do a lot with the relationship between him and his father, and him being able to forgive and understand the sacrifice that his father thought he was making to bring him back. And, of course, his failings as a father before the accident, were things that he was remorseful for, but he could not change those things. All he could do was try to be, try to be as good a father as he could moving forward. And, you hear more about his perspective on that in the epilogue when Cyborg, listens to that part where he talks about, now I'm going to talk to you as a father, not as a scientist. And I think that gave Cyborg had come to grips with his existence by that point and was comfortable and was proud to hear his father say the things that he said, that he's not, he's not broken. He has a chance to be among the great ones, to be something much larger than what your normal human flesh and blood body would have been had you never been in that accident, had your mother never died. All these things have helped to mold you and get you ready for this new life that you have to live. And that is a very well fleshed out character's arc that doesn't in any way to me seem as if you're dealing with an angry black man who's just, angry at everything. Although he did have that line when he met Diana straight from, and I've been meaning to ask Zach about that. Were you thinking about Tupac when you had Cyborg say, fuck the world? Because that's exactly what my vibes were as soon as I heard him say that. But let's continue going. Fisher told Johns it might be one thing for a non-black person to write a character for a comic, but it was another for a black actor to portray the character on screen. It was like he was assuming how black people would respond rather than taking the advice from the only black person, as far as I know, with any kind of creative impact on the project, Fisher says. I think that's a valid point. I think that's a really good point to make. And I think that that's not an insult to Jeff Johns in any way, and he shouldn't take it as an insult. I think that that's advice. Like, hey, I know you've written great characters for great comic books and great storylines for DC. I understand that, but we're portraying a black character now in real life. We're portraying him in this movie in live action. Let me help you do that, because I know you want to lean on your comic book and the traits that you've deemed these guys to have in your comic books, but black folks ain't going to see that comic book and understand what the hell you're talking about when it pertains to that black character when you're showing that in a movie. They're not going to understand that. So you need a little bit of, you should be welcoming a little bit of help on that. That makes sense to, like, hey, okay, yeah, you know what to do. Okay, yeah, just how you think it would feel natural, like you handle it like that. You know what I mean? That's a fair thing to ask, I feel like. That's a fair thing to ask. So, I don't see why that would cause a rift there, but let's continue on. Fisher says Johns did not yield. That was the last creative conversation about anything that Jeff Johns and I had, and I knew I was on my own. Fisher says Johns' reps denies that he ever dismissed any comments, adding that Fisher knew Johns, whose spokesperson requested that he be identified as Lebanese American. God. He said, I want to be. Hold on, man. I got to get a drink. This is making my mouth dry. Hold on, guys. Give me 1 second here. I will be right back. Goodness gracious. Goodness. This guy literally said, I would like to be identified as Lebanese American. All right. Okay. Had evolved traditionally all white DC properties like Shazam, Justice Society of America, and others into diverse groups of heroes in his extensive work as a comic book author. And nobody doubts that. Like Jeff Johns, and as much as he may be a crass dick, in my eyes, there is no denying that he is one of the greats in terms of comic book stories at DC. He has created a ton of classic comic book stories. There's no doubt about that. But that don't mean that you know anything about about cultures, about other cultures, and how other cultures perceive the way that they're portrayed. I mean, doesn't mean nothing. Like, it really doesn't mean anything. We're talking about comic book characters here, and we see the kind of craziness that we have in the comic book industry right now with characters who are just being given these labels to check boxes instead of actually giving them storylines that actually are relatable for people who may be, LGBT, or may be, of different minority groups. Like, there's not, I mean, it feels a little bit artificial in how they just add them in, but at least they're doing something, right? I mean, I guess it's the first stage. They're just blindly putting in these things and throwing in these different characters for just, to check the box. But I think the next step in that, it comes in understanding exactly what those characters should, how those characters should represent what it is you're putting them in for. Like, and that comes down to, having more a different perspective, having a perspective from someone who actually can help you create that character arc in a logical and sensible way that doesn't become overbearing for the overlying story itself. I think that's possible. But you have to do it with, it has to be done with finesse. It cannot be done. You can't just slap it around everything, like put stickers everywhere and think that that's going to get the job done. You have to do it with finesse. There has to be a real kind of understanding and touch that you have to make those things fly without kind of alienating the core audience. The core audience is always going to be less. The core audience will always be the hardest to get on board with drastic changes. So you have to give it to them in ways that are consumable without ruining their taste for the comic, ruining their taste for the movie, ruining their taste for the TV show. Like, you have to do it very slightly, and it takes skill to do that. You can't just say, I'm standing up for this and I'm doing that. No, you have to do it in a skillful manner so that people can openly accept it. You cannot force people to like something, but you can get them to accept it if you do it the right way. Now, continuing on. Let's see. Justice League producer Charles Roven, a veteran of DC superhero films dating back to the Batman Begins in 2005, says, I fully empathize with Ray that his character arc was significantly altered and shortened. I've also collaborated with Jeff over many years and found him to be a gracious and humble man. Jeff took it upon himself to put Cyborg in the Justice League comics in the first place and has written more about the character than any other individual except the creator. He loves the character Cyborg. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Does that mean that he knows jack shit about black culture and how a black cyborg needs to should most efficiently be portrayed in a live action movie? No. Doesn't mean he knows any of that, and it shouldn't be considered to be automatically transferable from one medium to the other, because it's really not. It's not that easy to say. That's like, again, in the football world, that's like saying a good college football coach should be a good coach in the NFL. History tells us that is absolutely not the case. Just because you win national titles in college does not mean you're winning jack shit in the NFL, because it's a different beast altogether. That is the same sentiment when you talk about black characters, when you talk about minority characters in media, in mediums like comic books, and how to bring them into mediums like live action. It's not always the same, and shouldn't be assumed that it's going to be an easy thing to transition over to, especially depending on the character. And Cyborg is a more complex character, I feel. I think that he is a more layered character even in the comic book, and Jeff Johns is a big part of that. But bringing him to, into this film again is not the same thing. So have to be cognizant of that. All these tensions were playing out during an extremely stressful time at the studio. AT&T's $85 billion acquisition of Time Warner, which was announced on October 2016, but didn't close until June 2018, was still pending. Justice League was a $300 million proposition, and it was troubled. Warner's had not been able to match Disney's consistent success with Marvel movies. Fisher felt that some of the studio execs' decision making was driven by fear of losing their jobs. Fear of losing that damn bonus. That's what Sujihara was in that shit for. He was trying to get that bonus, son. If we don't get Justice League out this year, I ain't getting my bonus, and I'm dipping next year. So shoot, I need this bonus, son. That's what he was on. Woo! That's what he was on. The tension only escalated when the issue of having Cyborg say "booyah" arose. That phrase had become a signature of the character thanks to the animated Teen Titans shows, but the character had never said it in the comics or in the original script. Fisher says that Johns had approached Snyder about including the line, but the director didn't want any catchphrases. Smart man. Yeah, nobody wants fucking catchphrases. This isn't Marvel. Damn! That shit's annoying. This ain't Marvel. Stop asking for catchphrases. Shit. He managed the situation by putting the word on some signs in his version of the film as an Easter egg, but John's rep says the entire studio believed the Booyah line was a fun moment of synergy. Get the fuck out of here. Are you serious? Wow. Wow. A fun moment of synergy. Oh my God. Where is the self-awareness? Wow. Hold on. Let me read that again. Hold up. He managed the situation by putting the word on some signs in his version of the film as an Easter egg. But John's rep says the entire studio believed the Booyah line was a fun moment of synergy. Get the fuck out of here. Man, look, first off, I don't believe that shit. I don't believe for 1 second the entire studio believed the Booyah line was a fun moment of synergy. Why? Because Toby Emmerich's already, I think it was Toby Emmerich, or it was one of those guys, already came out and said that after they saw the movie, they all thought it was shit. So that means that no, there was not a moment of synergy. A fun moment of synergy. Get the fuck out of here. These guys is crazy. Oh, wait, somebody said something about ads. Let me kill this ad. Get that shit out of here, man. Oh my God, there's another one. What is this? Oh, fake. Oh, fucking ads. Okay. No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. Fisher says he doesn't see the word itself as an issue, but he thought it played differently in a live action film than the animated series. And he thought of black characters in pop culture with defining phrases. Gary Coleman's "What you talking about, Willis?" Jimmy Walker's "Dynamite." As no one else in the film had a catchphrase, he said it seemed weird to have the only black character say that. Yeah, that is a little weird, isn't it? Like, why would you do that? Like, booyah? For what? Did we score an alley-oop bucket? What's going on here? I mean, maybe if he would have landed in the end zone in that football scene and would have threw the ball up in the air and said booyah, that might have been all right because it was during a football game where you might hear a catchphrase. But y'all cut that out of the movie. So that's no longer an issue, no longer something we can go to and say, yes, 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 booyah fits in here. No, booyah does not fit in the way that they thought it would fit in. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. That shit is crazy. That's crazy. These cats is really, and look, and this is something that I brought up in a conversation I had earlier with someone about this. What you talking about, Willis? Dynamite. Hey, hey, hey. That shit is all jigaboo shit. That's jigaboo shit that is insulting. That's insulting. Because you know who did those catchphrases? Why they did those catchphrases? It's because they wrote it in as a comic relief character to kind of someone who can be laughed at, not laughed with. Someone who can be made a fool of, who a lot of times in these shows, it was these catchphrases that were used when they were doing something stupid. And I mean, those actors who acted in those scenes to this day hate those fucking catchphrases because it's jigaboo shuck and jive shit. That's all it is. That's what it is, straight up. I'm being 100% when I say that. I cringe every time I hear dynamite. Every time I hear, hey, 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 or what you talking about, Willis? That shit is not funny to me. It never was funny to me. I always thought it was weird. Why is he saying that? I mean, I get why he's saying it, but why is that always the response now? And then you start seeing that there's one character in all these shows about these black families, about these black kids who are adopted by a rich ass white dude, who are saying these catch lines, who are making these stupid statements that really are just allowing or just being done for gags and really don't got a damn thing to do with anything about that character's storyline that they're dealing with in that episode. So, anyways, that's how I see that type of stuff. I've never liked it. Even when I was a kid, I thought it was weird. I'm like, why are they saying like, what is the dynamite? Like dynamite is, it's like culturally they're even using it wrong. It's just being used for laughs. Anyways, with reshoots underway, Fisher says Whedon raised the issue again. Jeff tells me Cyborg has a catchphrase, he told him. Fisher says he expressed his objections, and it seemed the matter was dropped until Berg, the co-chairman of DC Films and a producer on the project, took him to dinner. Yeah, you know where this is going. This is one of the most expensive movies Warner's ever made, Berg said, according to Fisher. What if the CEO of AT&T has a son or a daughter, and that son or daughter wants Cyborg to say booyah in the movie, and we don't have a take of that? I could lose my job. That is the most idiotic shit that I mean, come on, dude. You're a grown man. Really? You think it's because you ain't hear booyah? You think that they listening to what I mean, come on, man. Them kids wanted Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's what they wanted. You damn right, Jesse. They wanted Zack Snyder's Justice League. They didn't want to hear booyah. Shit. I mean, come on. And that's the thing. They try to guilt you into doing it. They try to, play on your emotions, try to make you, make you kind of submit and be, play fair with them about that shit. But come on, man. That there was nothing that was holding that movie back because of Booyah. Let's see. Fisher responded that he knew if he filmed the line, it would end up in the movie, and he expressed skepticism that the film's fate rested on Cyborg saying Booyah. But he shot the take. As he arrived on set, he says Whedon stretched out his arms and said a line from Hamlet in a mocking tone. "Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you." Fisher replied, "Joss, don't, I'm not in the mood." As he left the set after saying just that one phrase for the cameras, he says Whedon called out, "Nice work, Ray." Which, I mean, that's a little bit antagonizing, but, hey, bitch-assness is bitch-assness. That's how they do it. Even before the line was shot, Fisher's agent had called Warner Film Studio chief Emmerich to raise concerns about what was happening on set. After Fisher arrived in Los Angeles for additional photography in 2017, Johns asked him to come to the DC offices in Burbank. When they met in the conference room, Fisher said he had apologized to Whedon for his part in the conflict, which he had done in hope of preventing a real rupture with the DC team. Okay, so so this is a situation where now he's seeing that this is becoming a bigger issue than maybe he wanted it to be, and he's trying to play ball. And he apologizes and he wants to smooth things over. Let's move forward. Bada bing. I can see, sometimes you got to do that. Johns responded that having agents call Emmerich was just not cool. Man, every time this cat says something, this shit is fucking hilarious. Johns responds that having agents call Emmerich was, man, that's not cool. Come on, man. That's not cool, dude. That's not cool. Your agent calling Tony? Come on, man. That's not cool. Like, that's what that sounds like to me in my head. It's like, man, you little bitch. Shut up. You over here crying. Yeah, my agent. Who else am I have call him? I'm not going to call him? Shit. My agent call his ass. Let him know what's up. Like, I'm going to call the general manager of the team and be like, hey, I need to talk. You know what I mean? Like, get the fuck out of here. My agent's gonna call him because my agent speaks for me. That's what he gets paid to do. Anyways, that's just not cool. Fisher recalls. He said, "I consider us to be friends." Excuse me. Which he knew we were not, and I just don't want you to make a bad name for yourself in the business. Okay, now this is coming from a guy who's only been in the business himself about a year or a couple of years at this point, because he got brought in from the comic book side to the movie side. And that was for a relatively short period of time before they sent his ass packing from the movie side to the TV side. Because it's like, yo, we can't fuck with you. You've got crazy shit that you want us to put in these movies that nobody seems to like. They didn't like Green Lantern. They didn't like Wonder Woman 1984. Like, every movie that you've touched, and Justice League 2017, every movie that you've touched has been shit. So we're going to go ahead and, you go handle the TV stuff. Get you some Stargirl in. And then also, I mean, this is kind of a little threat. Like, I just don't want you to make a bad name for yourself in the business. Now, there's one thing that in football, if you are a player who is, who gives coaches a hard time for reasons that really revolve around your inability as a player to listen and understand what coaches are trying to show you what to do, and are trying to get you ready to play a game, or trying to get you ready, or trying to build you to the potential that, they feel that you can reach. When you reject a lot of that coaching, then a coach can look at you and deem you to be an uncoachable player, a player who is, arrogant, a player who doesn't listen, who thinks about themselves more so than, the job that they're supposed to do to help the team. Like, guys who get put in that uncoachable category, if a coach says, because coaches talk, teams talk, obviously, all teams talk to each other. when it comes to players and transactions. So if they say, hey, what do you think about this guy? He came from, if it was a guy who came from Jacksonville and they're going somewhere else, and, they call Jacksonville and say, hey, what kind of guy is this? And, if that team goes, hey, he's uncoachable, that's like damn near you could be blacklisted if somebody calls you uncoachable. That's like the worst thing you can be called as someone who evaluates you as a player. If they get 2 or 3 people who say you're uncoachable, your career is probably done. And I would think that it'd be the same way in Hollywood as it is with most industries. If you are someone who shakes the cages and causes too many problems, unless you have connections that protect you, then you can be cut off and siphoned off from being on the inside of that industry in particular. And I think this was kind of what Jeff Johns was saying, that, because you're playing good cop, bad cop here. He said, I consider us to be friends. That's good cop. I just don't want you to make a bad name for yourself in the business. That's bad cop. That's him trying to manipulate how Ray Fisher sees things. Like, that is an immediate red flag for me as a person if somebody tries to do that to me, because it means you're trying to manipulate me, and I'm not going to be manipulated for you to get ahead, for you to look good, while at the same time you're still keeping me, in a position where I'm not able to really have the freedom or have the things that I was promised when I signed up for this job. Like, that's some bullshit. That's some cutthroat industry shit. And so Fisher is really in a position where, because he's new to the industry, because he's not really in the industry like that, he's not letting himself get manipulated. And because they can't manipulate him, they're going to blacklist him. Because if they can't get you to play the way they want to play, then they're going to put you on the outside. You ain't going to get no play. And I think that's kind of this conversation is kind of making that a little bit clear to Ray Fisher, in my opinion. Fisher took that as a threat. John's rep says he never made a threat, but told Fisher that creative differences were not normally taken to the head of the studio by an actor's agent. Fisher was not the only Justice League star who was unhappy. Sources say Whedon clashed with all the stars of the film, including Jeremy Irons. Jeremy Irons? Alfred? Wow, if you're getting into it with Alfred, you're being a fucking dick. And Jeremy Irons is like, that dude is like Hollywood royalty, ain't he? Let's see. Alfred, damn. And one Justice League star ended up taking her complaints not only to the head of the film studio, but also to the chairman of Warner Brothers. A knowledgeable source says Gadot had multiple concerns with the revised version of the film, including issues about her character being more aggressive than her character in Wonder Woman. Which, that sounds weird, because that would have had to have been a complaint, I feel like, I feel like that's a complaint that would have been a complaint of the original version, because she is more aggressive. She is more of a warrior in the Snyder Cut. She's definitively more aggressive in the Snyder Cut. So I'm thinking maybe she's either the revised version would be the reshoots. I think maybe they're talking about, maybe Gal was talking about the scenes where her and Bruce are being aggressive towards each other, where they're having their back and forth, because that seemed a little bit, that obviously was different from what we saw in the Snyder Cut, but that seemed like that could have been a potential scene that she had a problem with, because in the original Snyder Cut, Diana and Bruce worked together pretty well. There's even like a little slight hint that there might be something there between them. And in the revised version, they were more combative towards each other, at least initially. And then it went from them being more combative to kind of overdoing it with the Wonder Woman taking care of battered, beaten Bruce, which, look, I think we all understand that Bruce Wayne is a human and he's not going to be, he's not, his body is going to break down eventually over time as Batman because of the physical toll it will take. But the way that they made him look in 2017 was rather pathetic. Batman isn't like walking, grabbing his shoulder, wincing. Batman don't do that. He goes into the cave and then he winces and screams once he gets into the cave when nobody's looking, and he pulls his shit off in the Alex Ross artwork, and he's got the scars all over his back. That's when he winces, and he only does that for a few seconds before he goes back into Batman mode. So no, there is no grabbing your shoulder, acting like you hurt if you fucking Batman while you in front of the cameras. It just don't happen. It just don't happen unless he's getting his ass beat. Unless he's getting broken like he did with Bane. You're not finna see Batman holding his shoulder like, oh. He's not gonna be rolling on the fucking ground. Oh, something's definitely bleeding. No, that ain't Batman. Fuck out of here. Hi. Okay, let's continue. Biggest clash, sources say, came when Whedon pushed Godot to record lines she didn't like, threatened to harm Godot's career, and disparaged Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins. my G. I mean, I know 1984 wasn't the greatest Wonder Woman film, but hey, you want to talk shit about Gal and Patty? I mean, that's risky by itself. I mean, they still bring bank. They're still going to bring bank from the theaters. They're still going to make money. They're still household names when it comes to these characters. I mean, that's brave. That is brave. While Fisher declines to discuss any of what transpired with Godot, a witness on the production who later spoke to investigators say that after one class, Joss was bragging that he'd had it out with Gal. He told her he's the writer and she's going to shut up and say the lines, and he can make her look incredibly stupid in this movie. All right. He's yeah. A knowledgeable source says Godot and Jenkins went to battle, culminating in a meeting with then Warner's chairman Kevin Tsujihara. Asked for comment, Godot says in a statement, "I had my issues with Whedon, and Warner Brothers handled it in a timely manner." 3 months after Justice League hit theaters, Whedon exited Warner Brothers' Batgirl project. Batgirl is such an exciting project. Warner's DC and Warner/DC such collaborative and supportive partners that it took me months to realize I really didn't have a story, he said at the time. Yeah, that's pretty much a cover up for, I'm getting the hell up out of here. When Justice League opened in 2017, the film was panned. It was 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. It grossed a disappointing $658 million. I mean, $658 million is nothing to scoff at, but it did cost like $400+ million to make the movie, so they was gonna need about $100 million more. Berg exited his job that December. Johns departed the following June, but Whedon was still a part of the Warner Media universe. In July 2018, a few months after he left Batgirl, HBO greenlighted his drama The Nevers straight to series. But in November 2020, just a couple of weeks before Warner Media said it had taken remedial steps after its investigation into Justice League, Whedon left that project too. HBO chief Casey Bloys has said that there was no complaints about Whedon's behavior on that series because he just didn't have enough time. This time, Whedon said he was not up to the physical challenges of making such a huge show during a global pandemic. I don't know anybody who just turned down the money. Warner's issued a clipped "We have parted ways with Joss Whedon." Okay. After Justice League, Fisher went on to play Mahershala Ali's son in the third season of True Detective. That is the guy who's going to be playing Blade in the MCU, which he calls a great experience. But in the coming months, he would hear fresh reports about what had gone on behind the scenes of Justice League, including the Angry Black Man conversation and other allegations, including John's two individuals who worked on Sci-Fi's Krypton series talked to Fisher about events that had taken place on the series. Multiple sources tell THR that the show's creators were passionate about doing some non-traditional casting, and that Regé-Jean Page, who would go on to become a breakout star on Bridgerton, had auditioned for the role of Superman's grandfather. But Johns, who was overseeing the project, said Superman could not have a black grandfather. The creators also wanted to make one superhero character, Adam Strange, gay or bisexual. But sources say Johns vetoed the idea. Okay, so I've talked about this a little bit on Twitter today in regards to this situation as a whole. Who is this purple pill? Purple pill. All right. If I got a mod in there, if he's going to keep spamming it, boop, boop. Let's get him moving. Anyways, let's see. So with this situation, you know, I talked about this on Twitter. I mean, honestly, just look at my Twitter. I feel like at the end of the day, when we're talking about comic book characters, when we're talking about aliens, Kryptonians, who are engineered, who are an engineered species, like manufactured, like their inbreeding their breeding is manufactured. So it's all done artificially. They're given roles, they're given positions, you know, and that's it. They're genetically disposed to that position that they're given. I don't think race has anything to do with any part of their social philosophy or social hierarchy. I think that when you look at the TV show, which I did watch the first season of it before it was canceled, Zod's family is dark. Like, this is a dark-skinned Zod and Zod bloodline. So clearly there isn't any real there's not any real anything there to do with race. So you could theoretically have a black grandfather, a quote unquote white father, and it would be purely through genetic disposition. Like, maybe they just changed the color trait, the pigmentation trait. It doesn't matter. There's nothing to be taken from that in their civilization. They just didn't look at anything that had to do with that. So, I mean, if you were going to throw anything off in regard to those kind of castings, you could have done it there, because it's a genetically engineered society. It's not a natural birth. Now, Clark was a natural birth. That's different. So he would actually be a result of his father and his mother's genetic union. So that would, that's where there could be, if he was genetically engineered in the same way, Clark could have easily have just been black, but he wasn't, because he was a natural birth, the first natural birth in centuries. So I think that's kind of I wouldn't say that that's like racist that they didn't cast this guy. I would just say that if you really wanted to make that, if he was that good where you felt like he could play the role, then you have a way of being able to explain that makes sense within the confounds, within the boundaries of the universe. That could happen. It's his grandfather. It could happen. It's not outside of the realm, because you prove that by having Zod's family as black. So, there you go. But it says here, Jeff celebrates and supports LGBTQ. What? Isn't it wrong? Isn't it LGBTQ characters, including Batwoman, who in 2006 was reintroduced as LGBTQ. Yeah. In a comic book series co-written by Johns. So what? This is the thing this is the crazy part. Like, don't do that. Don't say that. Don't start pulling out the cards and being like, see, I can't be anti this or that. I can't be because Look. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Nobody's going to listen to you when you do that. Do not do that. Just speak about what you see and what you believe and leave it at that. Don't start adding all these things and saying, see what I did here, because nobody wants to hear that. Nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to acknowledge it. It's going to be used against you. Don't do that. John also pitched Warner's on developing a television show around the first LGBTQ lead DC superhero television series. He adds, as for the role of Superman's grandfather, the rep says John believes fans expected the character to look like a young Henry Cavill. Why? They were not naturally born. They were all genetically engineered. So why would they look alike? The only one who was born naturally was Superman Kal-El. Naturally from Jor-El and his wife, and that's it. The other ones are all made. They're all made, literally. Several sources who spoke to Fisher around the time were willing to talk to a Warner's investigator. Among them was writer Nadria Tucker, who tweeted February 24th, I haven't spoken to Jeff Johns since the day on Krypton when he tried to tell me what is and what is not a black thing. Tucker tells THR that Johns objected when a black female character's hairstyle was changed in scenes that took place on different days. I said, black women, we tend to change our hair frequently. This is true. It's not weird, it's a black thing, she says, which means he probably said, oh, that's weird. And she said, it's not weird, it's a black thing. And he said, no, it's not. See, that's the thing. Don't tell black folks what is black. Just like I won't tell a white person what I perceive as a white thing. Unless we're joking around with each other and I'm like, that's some white shit. We might laugh at that. I've done that before and they've done that to me in the same way, joking around, and it's cool. I got no problem with that. That's not going to piss me off. I'll laugh at it all the same. So in this situation, it's a little bit different because she's trying to explain to him why this creative choice has been taken in a scene that's not happening at the same time as the other scenes. So, yes, that is a more professional conversation that's being had there. And when she gives him the information as to why it's being done like this, because of his probably questioning why it was done, that doesn't make any sense. Well, women don't wear their hair the same way every day of the week, bro. Come on. Anybody should know. Anybody should know that, right? Like, women wear their hair different whenever they feel like it. Come on. But we got some super chats in here. Let me get to these super chats real quick. Brenda Walsh for $1.99. Appreciate that, Brendan Walsh. Jersey Dolphins for $5. Appreciate that, Jersey. Appreciate you for that one. And RC from NYC, $5 super chat says, what's up, Uche? What's up, chat? Hope everyone is good. What I miss? Well, man, we're just going through this article here. This is the THR article with Ray Fisher and his coming out and talking about the situation with Justice League and his situation with guys like Toby Emmerich, Kevin Tsujihara, Jeff Johns, all of these guys who are part of this entire saga. And, I'm just trying to go through it and just give my perspective on things. But let's continue on because I think we're getting close here to the last stretch. Okay, so John's spokesperson, see, this is the crazy part about this. This right here, to me, means you're a coward. Come out and speak if you want to say. If you don't release statements when allegations are made towards you, unless you have litigation that is pending, you should just come out and defend yourself. Defend your own honor. Nobody, at least, you come out and say your piece and let the public square decide your fate. But when you send your spokesperson, Jeff Johns has a spokesperson for real. Your spokesperson is not necessarily the best person to speak for you right now, because your spokesperson is putting out a bunch of cookie cut, clearly scripted comments and statements that do not actually give insight into your actual perspective. They're just put up as blinders to try and mitigate any kind of damage that you feel like this story is going to do. I always feel like if you have something to say, you are the best person to say it for yourself. You are the only person who can speak from your own thoughts and really give a true representation to how you feel, or give people perspective that may give them more context so that they view you in a better light, rather than to continue to dunk on you as a dickhead and an asshole and a potential is. I mean, potentially. I haven't made a complete decision on that, but you are making a lot of tone deaf decisions and having tone deaf approaches to dealing with people on movies and TV show sets, which again, as somebody who's not of that industry naturally, I can see where a little bit of that power went to his head, and he thought that he had carte blanche to say a lot of the things that he wanted to say. I've seen people who get power drunk before, and it's not pretty, because they literally don't realize when they're saying some bullshit. They don't get it. They don't see it. They can't read the room. And I think that that's a lot of what was happening with these situations. You had Joss Whedon, you had Jeff Johns, you had these guys who were put in position to be on the set of this movie all day, every day, to oversee and report on things that Zack Snyder was doing, on things that, that other cast members were doing, on how the story was unfolding. And when, Zack had his issue with his daughter, then they had their opportunity to jump on that power vacuum. And Joss Whedon was given the power on one side, and he was being co-signed by Jeff Johns, Toby Emmerich. So these guys were power drunk, and they were literally doing whatever the fuck they wanted, trying to operate in a way that trying to create something in a light that they want to see it in. And they lost respect and lost sight of what the story had already been built into, and really, it began to crumble from there. And that's really on them. That's really on them. Brendan Walsh for $4.99. He says, "Don't want to get you off topic. Would like to hear your opinions on the Detroit Lions franchise sometime. Saw your Sue video, was awesome." Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. You know what, man? Things got bad for them Lions recently. I think losing Matt Stafford the way they did, getting Jeff, what's his name? Quarterback from the Rams. That guy is not an upgrade for them, but that's a tragic franchise. They've had a lot of tragic football things happen to them. But they got a fresh start that they're getting here with this new head coach. We'll see. He seems to be a meathead of a guy. We'll see if that works for Detroit, because a lot of these other things have not. The geniuses, the gurus, none of them have really worked. And they've had talent. So we'll see how it plays out for them. But yeah, we'll talk some more sports a little bit later. I'll probably do another stream tomorrow and talk on some sports stories. So just so you know there. Let's see. Okay. John spokesperson says, what were standard continuity notes for a scene are being spun in a way that are not only personally offensive to Jeff, I keep wanting to say Geoff, but to the people that know who he is, know the work he's done, and know the life he lives, as Jeff has personally seen firsthand the painful effects of racial stereotypes concerning hair and other cultural stereotypes, having been married to a black woman who he was with for a decade, and with his second wife, who is Asian American, as well as his son, who is mixed race. Now, look, Nobody is disputing any of these things. But the fact that that is the first defense he's going to go to instead of speaking on the merits of the situation at hand is not a good look. But I got a black friend. But I got a black wife. But I got a mixed kid. Okay, what does that really mean to the situation at hand itself? We're talking about you saying that that's not a black thing. Well, how would you know? Oh, well, you know, I was married to a black woman for a decade. Okay, but how do you know about black culture in regards to hairstyles and how those are worn and how it's done? You didn't help your wife do her hair every day. I'm sure you were probably not always available to know the kind of things that go on in that on that side of the culture because you work, because you got a job writing comics, because you got a job, you know, handling movies. Like, do you really know? You know, like you can't just saying these things just like that's just not, it's not the right way to approach it. Speak on the situation as it is right there in front of you. Do not reach into your bag of tricks and say, but I got a black friend, but I got a black wife, but I got a mixed kid, but I got a... Come on, nobody wants to hear that shit. Nobody wants to hear that. Just tell us what your perspective is. Don't make excuses for what you already said without providing perspective and context. That's the problem with that. Like, that doesn't give context as to what you really feel about things. You know? By late June 2020, Fisher went public with his dissatisfaction at what he viewed as Warner's inaction. For their part, Warner's sources contend Fisher was being manipulated by Snyder, who had hoped to reclaim control of the DC universe. They straight busted out a conspiracy theory. Fisher says that the assertion that a black man would not have his own agency is just as racist as the conversations Warner's leadership was having about the Justice League reshoots. That is a valid point. You're saying this black man can't think for himself, which is kind of corroborating the fact that you said you can't have an angry black man being at the center of a movie. That doesn't make you look good. That does not make you look good. You can't come out there and say that you think this black dude is being manipulated by Zack Snyder, but you don't think that a black dude shouldn't. Well, like it starts getting confusing because it's completely contradictory to what's being reported that you said about having an angry black man at the center of a movie. You're saying that he doesn't have his own will or his own way. You're saying that nobody will accept him as being someone who can carry the weight of a film's story arc in that manner. And then the guy who's acting him doesn't have his own ability to think for himself. He's being manipulated. Like, that's a double whammy of what the fuck are you talking about? It's a double whammy. I've been underestimated at every turn during this process, and that is what has led us to this point. And I think, again, that's a fucking valid point. That is a valid point. They underestimate his character, and they underestimated him as an actor. It's clear. That's clear to me from reading this stuff. They underestimate him. They see him as an asset for the company, not as an actor for the business, not as a creative. The same way that they treated Zack Snyder. They saw him as an asset or a liability, and they didn't see him as a creator to allow him to create. This is not something that's new when we're talking about Warner Brothers now. This is literally like the fourth situation that we can think of in the last few years where this has been the case. The Ayer Cut, another situation where they don't look at their director as a creator, as a visionary. They look at him as an asset who is a number, who is part of an equation in which they either add up to be profit or they do not in our eyes, without even actually having allowed things to play out. So we will change them and allow it and play it the way we want it to be played. And will, and will be the geniuses who take the success for it. Well, that has led to a number of very public course corrections that have done nothing but continue to make them look as if they don't know exactly what they're doing, or that they don't actually have a plan as they say they do. So, they've been hanging themselves. They've been stepping on the landmine willingly. Actually, they've been stepping on the landmine thinking that they were scot-free, and they've been doing nothing but blowing their toes off this whole time. So that's crazy. Had they taken me as seriously as they should have from the beginning, they would have not have made as many foolish mistakes as they did in the process. Snyder denies any role in influencing Fisher. Tweeting footage of himself praising Whedon at Comic-Con in 2017, Fisher wrote, "I'd like to take a moment to forcefully retract every bit of this statement." His earlier words had been based on studio-supplied talking points, he says. In a subsequent tweet, he said Whedon's on-set behavior had been gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable. He was enabled in many ways by Jeff Johns and John Berg. He did not elaborate. Berg told Variety it was categorically untrue that we enabled any unprofessional behavior. He had added that Fisher was upset about saying "booyah" as a well-known saying of Cyborg in the animated series. As Fisher continued to air his grievances on social media and in some interviews, he began to suspect when he tweeted that the studio would put out an announcement to distract from his message. On July 1st, the day that Fisher tweeted about Whedon's behavior, Deadline published an exclusive saying Warner's was making a live-action Frosty the Snowman movie with Aquaman star Jason Momoa voicing the iconic Snowman. What? That's a throwaway property. They could afford to lie on that one and nobody was going to trip. They could afford to lie on that one. A few weeks later, Momoa pushed back in an Instagram post. Oh, shit. I just think it's fucked up that people released a fake Frosty announcement without my permission to distract from Ray Fisher speaking up about the shitty way we were treated on Justice League reshoots, he wrote. Serious stuff went down. It needs to be investigated and people need to be held accountable. I think that is... Warner says the Untitled Snowman comedy remains in development. Even after Jason Momoa says that was some bullshit. He never even talked to them about nothing like that. I think, I think that it really, you have to consider, in a way, there has to be some consideration in validating a lot of what Ray has said, because he has had a lot of the big cast members come out and actually corroborate issues that they dealt with that were of similar form. And when you have them, when you have Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, both of them, I believe I read somewhere that Ben Affleck said that Ben Affleck wanted to have everyone walk off the set. If that would have happened, oh shit. You know what I mean? Like, if Ben Affleck would have had all of those main cast members walk off the set in protest, oh my goodness. Actually, we might have an entirely new executive staff at WB right now. An entirely new one, maybe. All right, let's get through this. In early July, Fisher spoke with Walter Hamada, who had taken the reins at DC Films. He says Hamada called Joss an asshole and said, "I'm just looking to get past anything to do with Justice League. Joss isn't here anymore, and I don't plan on hiring him again." But according to Fisher, Hamada said he did not believe Johns had done anything wrong. "I don't know John Berg very well. I know Joss was difficult, but Jeff, Ray, he's really getting dragged through the mud, and I'm sure you're getting your share of hate too." Fisher responded, "I'm fine with the hate because I know I'm telling the truth." He asked for an investigation. Later that month, The studio's HR department contacted Fisher. He says he spoke with 2 executives for about 2 hours. He adds that he offered specific allegations of abusive behavior toward himself and others and provided the names of some witnesses willing to be contacted. But he was wary, cognizant that HR departments are often known to show more allegiance to employers than to complaining parties. He became even more suspicious, he says, when witnesses started telling him they had not been contacted. Fisher requested an independent investigator and asked SAG-AFTRA to have a rep with him in the process. In mid-August, a Warner's HR exec told Fisher that an outside investigator had been approved, but his guard went up when the exec said, "We really like him. We've worked with him before." Still, Fisher tweeted that this represented a massive step forward. But then Warner's veteran told Fisher not to trust the investigation if a particular studio exec was overseeing it, because that person had previously helped sweep misconduct under the rug. When he spoke to the investigator, Fisher asked how many times he had worked for the studio. He declined to answer. Fisher asked who was overseeing the inquiry, and he said he would have an issue if it was the executive named by his contact. He still got no answer. Those are red flags. Feeling the situation felt pretty dodgy, Fisher went no further. On August 26th, the investigator provided a name, citing an attorney in the general counsel's office. When Fisher looked up the Warner Media website, he found the individual was the only black attorney whose headshot was visible. And in fact, that lawyer had nothing to do with the investigation. She handles matters for HBO, HBO Max, TBS, and TNT. Fisher wondered if naming her had been a simple mistake or a ploy to lull him into a sense of security with the idea that she might be on the same team as me simply by way of her being a black person. See, that's the crazy shit. Like, it's crazy because, you know, really the truth of the matter is when you do something like that, like that's immediately like odd. That's immediately odd, especially like as a black dude. If I was in this situation and you said, okay, here's the person who's going to be handling your case, and the only mugshot on this whole website of lawyers, the only one that has a mugshot available is the black person, and that's the person that is assigned to me coincidentally, is that supposed to make me feel like what? Like this is going to be, like this is cool now? Now it's valid? No, it doesn't. It's weird. That now I know you're trying to play games. Now I know you're trying to play games. That's how that comes off. That's how that comes off, like straight up. So, feeling even more distrustful, Fisher continued to tweet, writing on September 4th that Hamada had thrown Whedon and Berg under the bus while covering for Johns. Unfortunately, it's not until I start talking about people specifically that the needle starts to move, he says. If they were going to continue to try to cover things up, I wasn't going to let that happen. Fisher then got a call from Berg, who said he was sorry the actor had had an appalling experience on Justice League, and he hadn't been able to help, acknowledging that a bunch of straight white men had been running things. He said he hoped the studio would improve on that in the future. Berg said he had spoken to the investigator at length and truthfully. I let him know that it did mean a lot, Fisher says. I'm not beyond forgiveness when it comes to this kind of stuff. It was a very big thing for him to do. No one else in the process has reached out at all. The studio, meanwhile, defended itself that day in a statement. At no time did Mr. Hamada ever throw anyone under the bus, as Mr. Fisher has falsely claimed, or render any judgments about the Justice League production in which Mr. Hamada had no involvement. The company said Fisher had refused multiple attempts by the investigator to contact him. Fisher saw that as a smear. Okay, in early October, top Warner Media execs spoke with Fisher and his team, including a rep from SAG-AFTRA. Fisher's rep confirmed the content of the call. When Fisher pressed the question on how the investigator had come to provide the name of an in-house attorney who had nothing to do with the inquiry, a Warner Media executive on the call responded that the investigator had just pulled the name off the internet. What? Hold on. What? When Fisher pressed the question of how the investigator had come to provide the name of an in-house attorney who had nothing to do with the inquiry, a Warner Media executive on the call responded that the investigator just pulled the name off the internet. I don't know. That's weird. Again, like, who just pulls a name off the internet? Like, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. No. Christy Haubiger, Christy Haubiger, head of please don't make me say that again. Head of communications at Warner Media and the company's top inclusion officer. Inclusion officer? Didn't know they had that. Weird. Said the studio's statement that Fisher had refused to cooperate with the investigation had been based on third-hand information. So, okay, come on. The studio's statement that Fisher had refused to cooperate with the investigation had been based on third-hand information. So you're telling me that a billion-dollar conglomerate company allowed themselves to fall for third-hand info and use that as a demonstrative point as to the uncooperative Ray Fisher. And it wasn't like they heard it from their investigator who heard it from him that he wasn't going to cooperate. It was third hand. It was 3 people down. Like, come on. Come on, man. That's like whispering a secret into somebody's ear. And by the time you go 20 people down the line, it's a completely different phrase than what you would initially said. The studio's communications department had been responding emotionally to Fisher's public allegations against Hamada, she said, adding, I think they believed they were saying what they were saying was true. Fisher wondered why anyone at the studio, which was ostensibly the subject of the investigation, would comment at all. Pressed by Fisher, Haubiger declined to say who at the studio had approved the statement, but she said she was furious when she read it. I have made it 100% crystal clear to everyone in the entire Warner Brothers communications organization that not a goddamn word can be said about Ray Fisher. Haubiger said, if I catch anyone doing that, they're fired. Okay, so she said they would be fired, but here she says, pressed by Fisher, she declined to say who at the studio had approved the statement. So she knew who did it. Is that person fired is the question. Because that was a statement that was put out there based on false information, based on misinformation. Clearly as a third-hand comment that came 3 people from the source. Yeah, I think that would make sense that you'd want to out who that person was and fire them on top of that. So who said it? Fisher says he asked for an apology repeatedly in the weeks that followed. Warner Media kicked around some language that he said that he felt fell short. Ultimately, Haubiger told Fisher, I don't think that if people said something they believed was true, that there's an apology needed. If somebody says something that they believe to be true, but it is objectively false, then it's not true. Even if they believe it still after it's been proven to be objectively false. So that's an odd way to put something. After the studio put out a statement accusing him of not cooperating, what Fisher calls the hit piece, he asked for another investigator. Warner Media agreed to bring in Forrest, who they told him had handled the investigation of outed CEO Tsujihara. Fisher was initially optimistic, but says he began to turn wary when Forrest, who was white, led with the fact that she was an Obama appointee. Look, don't do that. Don't do that. Do not, don't use other black people as a way to prop up your potential perspective as something that could be favorable. Nobody's asking for that shit. We don't want you to do that. We want you to just be fair and do not be biased against us for based on any kind of stereotypes. We don't give a damn who you worked for in the past. We don't care because we're not judging you off that. We're judging you off how you treat us. Just do it fairly and you have no problem whatsoever. I don't need a handout. I don't want a handout. I just ask that you treat me the same way that you treat the next person. Don't tell me that, oh, I voted for Obama. That doesn't mean jack shit to me. Doesn't mean nothing to me. I paid more taxes when I was when Obama was president than I have ever at any other point in my life. I mean, yeah, I like Obama, but I mean, I'm not going to be ignorant to what the shit I didn't like. That doesn't make me feel any better if you say that. Don't do that. That's just for, in general, for people out there who maybe are, trying to learn a little something when it comes to our psyche as minorities, regardless of the shit you may hear in the world. The majority of us do not want handouts. We just want we just want it to be the same playing field. That's it. Level. That's it. So don't do that. Don't say nothing. Don't say that. All that's going to do is irritate us and make us skeptical of what you're trying to compensate for by saying that. Don't say that. Don't do that. It's cringe to read people say that. Still, Fisher was somewhat optimistic because he believed Forrest's previous THR investigation had exposed alleged misconduct. But she told him that she hadn't completed that inquiry before Sujihara left. Instead, he left after THR published an article about his entanglement with an aspiring actress, Charlotte Kirk. Initially, Fisher was told Forrest would work alongside the original investigator. He objected, and the original investigator withdrew. In December, Fisher says he and his SAG-AFTRA rep had a final conversation with Forrest, during which she said remedial action had been taken, some of which she said Fisher had probably seen, but she was not explicit. She said further remedial action would be taken, but again did not offer specifics. But she told Fisher she did not find evidence of racial animus. Warner Brothers chairman Ann Sarnoff said in a recent interview that the investigator found the cuts made in Joss Whedon's version of Justice League were not racially motivated, but Forrest didn't say that publicly. To Fisher, the information Forrest shared was so limited that it seemed the purpose was clear. She was only authorized by Warner Media to attempt to explain away anything to do with race. Warner maintains it has complete confidence in the investigation process and her conclusions. I think if that's the case, release it. So if that is the case, just release it, dead the whole situation, in the water. Nobody can say another word. Nobody can do anything because now all the information that was gathered is in public forum. Let everybody see it. They won't do that, of course. On the evening of December 11th, Warner issued a statement saying the investigation was finished in what Fisher calls a Friday night news dump. Witnesses contacted him asking what had happened, but he had no answers. A week later, he pressed Habeger and other execs for more information. They asked him to provide names of anyone who had told him they hadn't gotten closure. Fisher said he would not provide witnesses. In February, he tweeted that Hamada was the most dangerous kind of enabler who had shown that he would blindly cover for his colleagues and had worked with the studio to destroy a black man's credibility and publicly delegitimize a very serious investigation with lies in the press. Fisher says he was referring to the September statement that Fisher had refused to cooperate with the investigation, which he feels Hamada must have known about in advance. The company responded with a statement from Forrest saying Hamada was credible and forthcoming and did nothing that impeded or interfered with the company's investigation. Fisher believes this missed the bigger picture. While he accused Hamada of undermining and tampering with the investigation in a series of tweets, he says these were specifically in reference to the conversation he had with Hamada, in which the executives tried to dissuade Fisher from pursuing his grievances against Johns. Fisher does not, he says, believe that Hamada otherwise actively tried to interfere with the investigation. Sources at the studio, however, point to Fisher's tweets as evidence of shifting grudges and a lack of credibility. Before things had gone sour, Fisher was expected to play a supporting role as Cyborg in the planned in the planned movie The Flash in June 2020. Fisher says he had a call with director Andy Muschietti that seemed positive, but the discussion hit a snag when Warner's framed a 2-week shoot as a cameo. Yeah, 2 weeks is 2 weeks. That ain't no cameo. You can do a lot of scenes in 2 weeks. I mean, I would assume. I don't know. I'm not in the movie business. But 14 days. I've done TV shows before and stuff like that. I know you can get 30 minutes of shots in a 12-hour day. So, I mean, hey, offering only a fraction of what Fisher says he should have been paid for reappearing as Cyborg. By late September, he was upset by press reports that he was demanding to double his pay. See, now that's some shady shit right there. Like they put out there in the press that he was demanding double the pay when he was just demanding to get paid what he's supposed to, get paid what he's supposed to get paid. Being on a set for 2 weeks, doing makeup, doing all their little CG stuff for computer graphics, blah, blah, blah. I mean, 2 weeks on a movie set. I mean, I don't know what they call a cameo, but I would think that there's probably a considerable amount of time to get some things shot in those 2 weeks. So, who knows? I mean, y'all, if you know better than me, let me know in the chat. But it says here, ultimately, the studio removed the cyborg role from the movie, citing a December 30th tweet. The studio said, given his statement that Mr. Fisher will not participate in any film associated with Mr. Hamada, our production is now moving on. Fisher says he wasn't surprised. When I first spoke up, I assumed there was no way these guys would allow me to do my job in peace, he says. Now working on the ABC anthology series, Women of the Movement, Fisher says he knew the struggle could be costly. I'm not so indebted to Hollywood that I haven't been willing to put myself out there, he says. I don't believe some of these people are fit to be in positions of leadership, says Fisher, who explains he's not looking for anyone to be fired. I don't want them to be excommunicated from Hollywood, but I don't think they should be in charge of the hiring and firing of each other. Fisher knows he's not going to win that battle, but he feels a point has been made. If I can't get accountability, he says, at least I can make people aware of who they're dealing with. So, that was a long read. And just kind of bringing things full circle here, this is a very complicated situation, I feel like, personally, because there are a lot of ways that as a new actor, as somebody who is new to that industry, who hasn't been involved in it in any considerable amount of time, there is sometimes in a lot of ways when you deal with these people who have that kind of power, decision-making systems and traditions and cultures that are in place that you are going to be shocked to learn exists when you get into that world. And I think that part of this situation has to do with the shock of being exposed to the underbelly side of Hollywood and the cutthroatness of its business side and the backstabbing and the backdoor wheeling and dealing that these guys happen to get involved in on a regular basis. It really can be very shocking to the system for someone who's never been exposed to that kind of culture. And do I feel like there was probably some ignorant, some really ignorant, maybe borderline, I mean, I don't want to call anybody a racist without knowing 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt. But there are things that he brought to light in this article that for many people who are minorities, they will look at that shit and think it's borderline racist and like some racist shit. But there's more to it than just saying that, because a lot of it has to do with pure ignorance and not even understanding how certain cultures operate, which is which, you know, to a certain degree is you know, how you can't, how mad can you get at somebody who's just too damn dumb, or not too damn dumb, but just don't know shit about your world? How mad can you get at them for making dumb assumptions about it? You know what I mean? Like, Booyah. Like, I'm sure a lot of people don't understand what the big deal is about Booyah, because you see that Cyborg in Teen Titans is a big part of that. You know, and that's a catchphrase that character has used for years, but that don't mean nothing when it comes to black culture. It doesn't. And, you know, that is fine, and it fits into that world of that slapstick comedy in the Teen Titans animated TV show. But in an actual movie, a big budget, 100, 200, 300 million plus dollar mega movie franchise, where you're trying to tell a coherent story, where you're trying to give somebody a serious arc, because this is a new character that's being introduced to the audience, and you're trying to give some weight to the story with how they're being represented. You know, that is a complete mischaracterization of the character. And for somebody who doesn't know that maybe a different actor, like maybe if it's an Idris Elba who's asked to say that, maybe if Idris Elba feels that's some bullshit, well, I mean, it's different with him because he's got a ton of clout in the industry. So, I mean, if he was like, man, I'm not saying that shit, ain't nothing that Jeff Johns or Joss Whedon gonna do to make him say it. But I think being a young actor, or being a rookie, quote unquote, a rookie actor in the Hollywood, he was expected to take that L into you know, and to just be happy to be there. That's really what they want. They want you to just be grateful to be here and do what the fuck we say. That's what they tried on Gal Gadot. She was in the same kind of situation, though different, because she got Wonder Woman under her belt at this point, and she's solidified her star status, and she's a new star, but she's a star. And she's got a sequel coming up that's highly anticipated. So, and she's got a director who is an up and comer, high, you know, director with a good amount of clout at that time. So she's got some backing. She's got some influence that she can say some things and bring some things to light that they're going to respond to at the very top of that hierarchy, because they know that she's a cash cow right now and she's got a team behind her. So, you know, they tried to pull it on her. Joss Whedon tried to pull it on her. She checked him. She had him checked. So of course, that I can imagine how much animosity that might have created. But who is that going to trickle down to? Shit rolls downhill. So Cyborg is the least tenured of all of these actors, including with Jason Momoa. He's still the least tenured, even behind Jason Momoa. So Cyborg is going to get the shit of the shit. The actor is going to get the shit of the shit from these people, because now they couldn't enforce themselves on the stars. They just can't do that. That ain't going to happen. Ain't nobody going to tell Ben Affleck what to do on that set. None of them. They ain't going to tell Henry Cavill what to do. They found out they can't tell Gal Gadot what to do. I mean, Ezra Miller, hey, you know, Ezra Miller was probably playing his role and doing his thing. He's got other movies he's trying to finish up as well. He's not trying to put none of his shit in, and I get that. He's not trying to put his shit on blast. He's got his own shit he got to deal with. I get that. But Ray Fisher was the least tenured of these actors, so he is going to be put at the bottom of that rung. He's going to be treated like shit, and some of it will come off as being racist. It will, because they really tried to play this cat. They really tried to, like, you know, they tried to do good cop, bad cop on him. Then they tried to, you know, guilt trip him. They tried to guilt trip him after that. And, you know, it just kind of just kept as he was seeing it for what it was. He was seeing it and he was calling it. And they was getting mad because he was calling it. And that's the problem, you know, is that he didn't, you know, he was too prepared for them without realizing it, because he didn't know the culture. But he knew that they was on some bullshit, and he started calling it. And then they get mad at that. So, you know, I think that Uh, I think that, until we see the report itself, until Warner Brothers actually releases the report, then they know that they can always push back against Ray Fisher's narrative, because he hasn't been willing to put certain people in the lights in the way that maybe some other people who were blowing the whistle on stuff might have done to blow the whole house up. But I think that Ray Fisher is being considerate of the people that this can affect and why he's not dropping those names. Now, look, that is the double-edged sword of this situation, because really and truthfully, unless we know those names, it's hard for final validation to be made by the people who you are presenting your case towards, the public forum. Because at this point, if something was demonstratively untrue or was objectively and provably false on what he was saying, there would be cease and desist orders coming. There would be lawsuits coming. There hasn't been any of that. They've done their investigation, and that has been it. They haven't given us the info on that investigation, and they have not told Ray Fisher that he must stop saying what he's saying because it's not true. Which means if they're not going to sue him or demand that he stops, then there must be something in the reports that actually validates what he must be saying. And if that's the case, then their ass needs to drop the report so we can see it. Until then, I'm going to and this is me saying that I'm going to understand more about where Ray Fisher is coming from than anything that they're telling me that they view how they view things on the Warner Brothers side, because they won't release their report. So what Ray Fisher is saying to me, because I can relate to some of what he says, and I understand that a lot of that shit, it does happen. You just don't see it the same way that we see it. People who are minorities who are more used to dealing with microaggressions of those natures, where people may not necessarily be aware that they're making them. But that's also why you don't always put people on blast for things when you know that they just don't know. When I know somebody just don't know, they just don't get it, they think that's a stereotype, but they don't get it, then I don't get mad at them. I just wait till I get a chance to talk to them. I say, look, that shit right there, that's a stereotype. Relax on that. You know what I mean? I won't make a big deal of it. I won't try and, put you out there as being something that you aren't, but I definitely will let you know personally, hey, what you said that's a little iffy. Just know that that's not the case with a lot of people. You're generalizing, and I leave it at that. I really am not a person to go on a crusade. I ain't trying to get nobody canceled, no shit like that. But a lot of things that he was talking about in this article, or a lot of things that I have dealt with or allowed to slide in my mind, because it wasn't for me. I was going to let some things like that slide because, some people are just ignorant and they don't know. So I don't feel like explaining it to them, or I may explain it to them. However I feel at that moment, that's how I handle it. But it's weird. It's really weird that a lot of the responses from the other side of this argument, of this situation, are very vague, very scripted, not really getting into the meat of anything responses, which makes me believe that, there's some truth to what Ray's been saying. So I will continue to feel until they show me otherwise that there is something that they don't necessarily want in the public sphere. And, this is a business, this is a corporation. They have a lot to lose if they damage their image to a point where people decide that they're no longer really interested in how they're doing business at this particular junction. So that's how I see it. Now, got a super chat from Mr. J310 for $5. Appreciate that, Mr. J. You say thoughts on the writer of this article saying WB didn't want her to publish this article. Honestly, Okay. How do we know that? We don't know that. I mean, I'm sure we get it, but I think that's more of a promotion of the article itself and trying to, get more hype built up for it than necessarily that is, exactly, I'm not, unless she has like some recorded audio of somebody from WB calling her last night saying, you better not put that shit out there or we're coming for you, bitch. Unless they do something like that, excuse my language, unless they do something like that and you can show us that, to me, you hyping your article, which is totally fine. Hype your article up. This is what they don't want you to know. That's what you see in all of these tabloid things. That's what you see in all of the People magazines and this and that, all the behind the scenes stuff. Those are the words they use. They don't want you to see this. This is the stuff they want kept secret. So she's hyping up her article. Do what you do. It's the most talked about thing for the day. And that's cool. I have no problem with that. I have nothing against, adding some hype to it to get more, get more eyes on it. That's fine. That's fine. But I think that's I think we have pretty much went through this entire article, broke the entire thing down, kind of gave you guys my perspective. I just wanted to look at this for what it was. And those were my takeaways from it, guys. That's how I look at it. That's how my perception of this situation really is that's how I see it in my eye, because I have, I've been there, and I think most people, and I don't even think it has to necessarily be, always a race thing. I don't think that. I just think that, in these certain situations, a lot of people's ignorance is their downfall, because they just don't know about what they're dealing with, and they try to put out there, they try to project that they do when they don't, and that's, and that's where you can get caught up. That's where you can get caught up. And I mean, we all make mistakes, and we all look like fools at times for things we say. So, there's nothing wrong with owning up to that and keeping it moving. People are much more forgiving when you own up to it and move on, rather than try and make excuses and say, but I got this. Doesn't that mean I can't be this if I got this? No, doesn't mean any of that. So, but I do appreciate everybody for being in here on the stream. We are going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. I really think that we did a thorough job, and you guys have been great listening to me ramble on here. But definitely do appreciate everybody for being in here on the stream. Tomorrow I will be back at it. I'm going to try and get I'm going to try and do as much live streaming on my main channel on as far as pop culture stuff goes. I'm going to try and get all that done on this main channel, live streaming only whenever I do pop culture stuff, until my other channel gets monetized. Once it gets monetized, then I'll start doing my pop culture live streams over there. Still going to be doing my sports stuff on this main channel. It's going to be predominantly sports things. So for anybody out there who's in my sports audience, just know that I will continue using this main channel for predominantly sports. Just dropped a video earlier today, or earlier technically yesterday early afternoon, about Brandon Marshall and his little rage scene that he had, and talking about NFL and NBA contracts and the differences between them. So make sure you go check that out if you haven't checked out any of my newer videos on this channel this week. But I appreciate you guys very much. About to jump up off of here. I will see you all on the next one. Hope everybody has a wonderful night. Holler at y'all soon. Peace.